We look at studs and duds from the Ravens 13-12 win over the Atlanta Falcons in week 2 of the preseason. All that and more coming up next here on this bonus edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube and in audio form wherever you get your shows. We have 5 days per week coverage of the Baltimore Ravens, plus bonus episodes like today. We go live after every single Ravens game, every single piece of Ravens big news. So tell a friend, tell a family member as well that we have them covered if they're looking for daily Ravens coverage. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. On today's show, the Baltimore Ravens, they defeat the Atlanta Falcons 13-12 in preseason week 2, pick up their first preseason win of the year, and there were plenty of takeaways from that game. We'll get into some players that did really well. We'll get into some players that didn't do well, some positional groups, some trends that weren't great from the Ravens, but also, of course, trends that were. So we'll talk about studs in the first part of the show, studs for the Ravens, and then we'll get into who was a dud, who ended up not doing so well in the second part of the show. And then we'll look at some of those trends, what to look out for, positional battles to watch, as we only have one more time before the regular season starts to see these guys in live action game settings as the roster begins to maybe take shape a little bit. So we'll get into all of that here on today's show. Plus, of course, get into a general recap of the game while we're going along and talking about who did well and who did not. So we have a lot to get into, 100%. Let's dive right in here. Starting off with some of the guys who performed really well. I talked about this on the live show. We did do an instant reaction show yesterday, so if you haven't checked that out for more of a more in depth, I guess, on the game and to hear my initial thoughts right after the game ended, be sure to check that out. But we're going to start off this show just like how we started that one off, and giving a huge round of applause to Josh Johnson. Look, I mean, we can all say we sat here after week 1 of the preseason. We were worried. I know I was, at least, about the backup quarterback position. I had said, hey, let's give these guys one more week. Let's see what they can do. Going into this game, I was decently worried about the position, and I think that Josh Johnson would need to have a pretty perfect game in order to take my hand off of the panic button. Well, let's say he had a perfect game, literally 11 of 11 on the day, not one incompletion for Josh Johnson, which incredible for him. A great bounce back performance, 120 yards and 1 touchdown to Owen Wright. I mean, this was exactly what he needed, exactly what the doctor ordered for Josh Johnson for sure. This was a guy that was effective on all 3 levels on Saturday. Short game, intermediate game, deep passing game as well. That's one of the things I love from this game, is that Baltimore pushed the ball down the field. We have completions here, longs for some of these receivers. You got 56 for Dayton Wade. We'll talk about him. 26, 31, 19, 12, 15. The Ravens were pushing this ball down the field, a stark contrast to what they were doing in week 1 of the preseason against Philadelphia. So I loved that, and I loved Josh Johnson's game. Now, I'm not completely sold on the position, right? I still think one more week of good play will definitely get me in the, okay, Josh Johnson is the option and is fine at that position. But he did so much to lift his stock up, to help himself out here. He was definitely one of the biggest studs of training camp here. Well, he has been a little bit iffy at training camp. Excuse me, I meant the preseason, where, look, he ends up struggling in week 1, but it counts what you do the next week. It's 1 week at a time. And Josh Johnson in week 2 certainly did a great job. And also Emory Jones, right? Last week we were sitting here talking about Emory Jones as like this guy that had 1 snap, botched it. Oh, people were saying, get him off the team. And, never want to see this guy again. And I said, look, all right, that's not a real opportunity for Emory Jones, right? Get him in some game action, get him some drives. And he ended up going 7 of 9 for 100 yards, and that includes that 56-yard touchdown to Dayton Wade. I thought he looked great out there. He had more opportunity than Devin Leary. Leary finished 3 of 5 for 24 yards. I thought both Josh Johnson and Emory Jones did a lot of good things on Saturday. Moving on, we'll save the running backs for the second part of the show. Owen Wright did score a touchdown, though, so shout out to him. But Dayton Wade is a guy that we know in the first preseason game ended up having that drop, bounce back pretty nicely. But he beat his defender on Saturday on a nasty double move. And it's kind of reminiscent of what Demarcus Robinson did to that Commanders defender in the preseason. Then I think he did it later in that year as well to Eli Apple. But had this defender absolutely fooled. It was a beautiful route. And Emory Jones dropped it right in the breadbasket. So amazing pitch and catch from those guys. And Wade is somebody that is making a name for himself. He obviously has come up multiple different times throughout training camp. And as an undrafted guy, we talk about that wide receiver spot is one that, there's going to be some competition for whether it be the 6 wide receiver spot. Do they keep 7? But Dayton Wade, at the end of the day, I thought that he helped his stock tremendously, and he was another one of the studs from this game for the Ravens. Keith Kirkwood had 2 for 37, a couple of really nice long chunk gains for him. He was involved in this game. Tylan Wallace had a great 31-yard catch. He is probably still the front runner in my mind, but again, a lot of these guys are coming for 1 or 2 roster spots. It's about 6 or 7 guys that are doing that. And that includes other guys like Malik Cunningham, who ended up catching 3 passes. Anthony Miller had, I think, 3 consecutive passes that were caught by him. He's been a name that's been popping up all over the place at training camp since he's been signed. He hasn't really been in Baltimore that long, right? But I think that overall, these receivers, they showed things. They got open. They were able to catch the ball. We didn't really see a ton of drops. I don't think if I'm not mistaken, I don't think we saw one. Maybe I'm forgetting one here or there, but I thought it was a really solid day for Baltimore's wide receivers overall. On the offensive line, I thought Roger Rosengarten was fine. I thought his pass protection was good. I thought his foot speed was good. Voorhees, we'll kind of get to this in the second part of the show. He had one play where he was beaten really badly on a sack, but I think other than that, I'm not going to say a guy was awful off of one snap. Like the one snap can be bad, but I thought he was fine otherwise. But to me, I think some of the biggest storylines in terms of who was a stud from this game come on the defensive side of the ball, where David Ojabo impressed me so much. This was his first game back. Obviously, there were some question marks about, is he going to start? Is he not going to start? Is he going to play? What's the situation? Is he cleared yet? But he started, and he did a lot of good things in this game. Did not record a tackle on the stat sheet. So if you're a box score watcher, you're probably coming over here and you're saying, what, David Ojabo, no tackles? What are you talking about? This guy was terrible. David Ojabo is one of the best defenders on the field for the Ravens on Saturday. He was getting QB pressures, had a quarterback hit as well. He was all over the place, set the edge really nicely on a couple of plays early on as well. This is a guy that we know this is not a talent issue with David Ojabo. It's about him staying healthy, and we've seen him have success during regular season real football here. Rookie season, he had it right at the end of the year. Second season, he had it at the beginning, but he hasn't been able to stay healthy over his 2 years. But in this game, he showed exactly what he needed to show. He showed, this was about as perfect of a game as you could expect from David Ojabo for him not getting on the stat sheet with a tackle. He was constantly wreaking havoc, constantly getting pressure. He had a nasty spin move. It's circulating on social media right now, a nasty spin move that resulted in his quarterback hit on Taylor Heineke. He was all over the place. And that, to me, that's why I'm not as big into yes, we'll go over box score stats here, definitely. But it's not all about the box score stats. It's about game impact. And David Ojabo had one of the biggest game impacts on the defensive side of the ball for the Ravens. If David Ojabo can get, I don't think anybody's asking him to be a 15-sack guy this season, right? But if he can go anywhere in that 6 to 9 total, I think people will be relatively pleased with that for a third edge rusher, and you're not necessarily going out there and having to either spend capital on a guy or sign a guy, right? You have your guy in-house. So that, to me, David Ojabo, great debut for him. And a guy who I don't think we're going to see in the preseason again is Trenton Simpson, because Trenton Simpson was locked in this game. He did so many good things too. It was different though, right? Simpson was on the stat sheet, right? Finished with multiple big plays. And if you want the actual box score stats, Simmons finished with 2 tackles on the day, but he included a tackle for loss in there, a pass deflection, had a quarterback hit as well. He was doing a little bit of everything, but the thing that impressed me the most for Trenton Simpson was in pass coverage. Trenton Simpson in pass coverage, that is one of his strengths. And I said this on the live show as well. The difference between Patrick Queen and Trenton Simpson, or at least one of them, is Patrick Queen struggled with pass coverage. That was not his strong suit. That Trenton Simpson can do that. He can cover running backs and tight ends out of the backfield. He can run with wide receivers. Patrick Queen struggled with that a lot over the course of his Ravens tenure, right? He was a good player for the Ravens. He ended up turning out to be a really solid guy. But Trenton Simpson has better pass coverage chops than Patrick Queen. So that to me was one of the big things that stood out. And obviously he was all over the place, made a couple of really nice tackles, including one in the open field on Taylor Heineke, which was great. So I think that Baltimore, they have a special player here, but obviously he needs to get acclimated to the NFL game in a regular season setting more often, not just that Week 18 game against Pittsburgh. Coming up, we're going to be talking about the rest of the players that performed well and were studs for the Baltimore Ravens during their Week 2 preseason win over the Falcons. And we're going to be getting into the duds who did not perform well, what happened, players, positional groups, and a lot more. Stay tuned. We got plenty to talk about here on the show. First, the show is brought to you by Gametime. And for me, I love going to MLB games during the summer. I've loved doing that since I was little, and I have a ton of memories doing it. And I try to go to a couple of games per year as well. But Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace in Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. And on the Gametime app, there are plenty of Orioles games left as they continue their hunt for the AL East division. And, of course, with the Ravens, Gametime has all your deals over there as well. And they have a ton of great features, my favorite being last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. Plus, the app is super easy to use, which is another one of my favorites there. It's easy to navigate around. And the other features include flash deals, zone deals, all-in pricing, which that all-in pricing has to be turned on. Seat views, lowest price guarantee, Gametime ticket coverage, and so much more. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off first purchase. Turn spy again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, spelled LOCKEDO on NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today, last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We're back for our second segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher here with you still on this Sunday. Really appreciate everybody for being here today, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every day. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow along in video form and audio form for 5 days a week of Ravens coverage. Now, getting a little bit more into who else played really well for the Ravens. We'll finish up that conversation now. I thought that Beau Brade was everywhere, personally. Undrafted guy out of Maryland. We know he's a local product, really solid player, seems to be everywhere, and he certainly was that at Maryland. But, I mean, he's shown that over the first 2 weeks. I thought he's looked really, really impressive over these first couple of preseason games. And in this game in particular, even though his interception did not count, he ended up fumbling the ball as well, but the ball at the ground anyway. I thought that he did a really good job of being involved. He had a pass breakup. He was able to lay down a couple of big hits. He was solid in run support in a couple of plays as well. He finished this game not necessarily with the big stat line, but he led the team in tackles. He had 8 total tackles in this game. 5 of them were solo. He was doing a little bit of everything. Now, there is a bit of a roster crunch at safety and defensive back just in terms of how many guys the Ravens do have there. But Beau Brade is making a really, really solid case to make this roster because other people fighting for those spots are Pepe Williams, are Darius Washington, both of which I thought played well. I thought Washington, even though he didn't necessarily jump out in any way, shape, or form, had a pretty solid game overall. And then Pepe Williams, he was used as a blitzer off the edge. I know he did have the penalty, or at least it was called on him later in the game, but the Ravens are going to have that defensive back blitz as a staple of their defense again. And Pepe Williams was certainly a guy that, can kind of fit that mold in terms of when Arthur Millette is able to come back. You can use Pepe Williams in that role if you need to. Other guys who I thought performed well, I thought Brent Urban had flashes. I thought Travis Jones had a flash or two here. But other than that, I think that about covers the stock up or the stud per part of the show here. Tavius Robinson was the guy who actually won the game for the Ravens, by the way. I want to point that out on that because the Ravens could have lost this game. They gave up a late touchdown, that defense did, right with about 30-ish seconds left, and the Falcons decided to go for two, get the 2-point experience, and Tavius Robinson sniffs out the read option, and I thought that he has looked really good this preseason as well. But yeah, that about does it. That actually does it now. On to because with the studs do come the duds, with the winners do come the losers, right? The duds part of this, I think we do start off with Daniel Faalele. Again, I don't think that every snap was bad. I don't. I think that's unfair to say. But he just does not look like a guard still to me. That's what I'm basing this off of. There were plays on Saturday where he just couldn't get to his guy. In this offense, you have to be athletic enough and have the ability to pull and be effective in space. And Faalele had plays in this game. One in particular stands out where he was trying to move out on a pull and he couldn't get there in time, and that ruined the whole play. And in this offense, you can't do that, right? You don't have to be the fastest offensive lineman in the world to play in this offense. But one of the things coming out of school for him was, look, he has the size, he has just the strength, the athleticism is there to an extent, but in this offense, it's different. And they obviously want to see every single thing that they can out of him here. They are really dragging this thing out. I mean, if we see him in week 3 and then they go with somebody else as the starter, I'll just be like, well, why didn't you just play that guy as a starter? That's what I would probably say. Faalele is somebody that I think could be fine as a backup right now. As a starter, I'd be worried, especially because in week 1, if Faalele doesn't show anything next week, or at least not have a good game, well, who are they going up against? It's Kansas City. Who's on that defense? It's Chris Jones. So that's a tough test for inexperienced guard combo of Andrew Voorhees and Daniel Faalele, but Voorhees has shown more at this point than Faalele has. I'd feel more confident. Look, I wouldn't feel great about it, but I feel more confident in Andrew Voorhees going up against Chris Jones than Daniel Faalele. I just think that would be a turnstile matchup right now. And I hate saying it, but Faalele's, again, every snap hasn't been bad, right? I think there's that misconception out there where people are just like, Faalele's terrible, get rid of him. He brings nothing to the table. That's not true. There were plays where he was able to get his hands on guys and they weren't moving, right? He's shown things to me, which I think is why I'm on board with keeping him as like a top-ish backup type player. But as a starter, it would worry me. And I really hope if they start him, he proves me wrong. Because I believe he has talent. I really do. But right now, we're going to have to see. But who would it be? That's the conversation. I will put Ben Cleveland in this category. It's for one play. Again, I don't like to define players off of one play. I literally said that. But this one was pretty bad and egregious. And John Harbaugh was mad about it for the entire rest of the game and in his media availability after the game. Like he made a point himself. He wasn't even asked about it. He made it a point to bring it up and was not happy about it. Ben Cleveland had a bad snap, rolled 10, 15, 20 yards down, however many yards it rolled. Falcons recovered that. That is one of John Harbaugh's biggest pet peeves. He has a lot of them in that doghouse. You can get in there for any particular reason. But yeah, that was not good. Not great. The offensive line looked overmatched at times. It was not a great day for the offensive line as a whole. I think individual players showed flashes, as I mentioned. But overall, I thought the line had a pretty bad day. And, that's you're not having Linderbaum out there. Stanley's not out there, right? But here's the thing. 3 of those guys will be in a starting rotation come week 1. So that's the conversation there. And then to that point, the run game. The run game was not good for the Ravens today. Obviously, it is not all the running backs' faults. That is a product of the offensive line and how they did not play well. But you look at the stats here. The Ravens averaged 2.4 yards per carry. Chris Collier was the leading rusher for the team. He had 12 carries for 29 yards. John Kelly, their newly signed guy, had 5 for 21. Owen Wright had 8 for 9. 1.1 yard per carry. Wasn't a good day for the running backs. It wasn't. The run game was bad offensively. Not pinning it all on the running backs. Again, it's a combination, running backs, offensive line. But then also to the other point, the run defense was bad. The run defense might have been the worst unit of the game, if we're being honest. Again, same point as I mentioned with the offensive line. Some individual players showed flashes. Josh Duopo had a solid play. I mentioned Urban, Travis Jones, other Project Washington made a play. But the unit as a whole was bad because Baltimore averaged 2.4 yards per carry. Well, you turn that over to the Falcons side, the Falcons averaged 4.9, technically almost 5 yards per carry, where they had guys running all over this unit, all over it. And every single player in their defensive line rotation played but Justin Madubuike and Michael Pierce. And those are two really big pieces. Don't get me wrong. And Michael Pierce is a really big piece. But that was not, it seemed like every play the Falcons were getting to at least the second level of the defense, if not the third. And it wasn't good. It wasn't good whatsoever. But coming up in the final part of the show, we will be talking about some other players that were disappointments based off of lack of usage and just overall health. Plus, we'll be getting into some trends to look out for as the final preseason game quickly approaches now. So stay tuned. We got a lot to get to here on the show. First, the show is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools you have to find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And for me, I've had a ton of great experiences over on LinkedIn, whether it's finding jobs, networking, connecting. LinkedIn has you covered with all of it. And LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job. You might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit our leading job site. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Plus, 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We're back. Our final segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still rocking out with you here on this Sunday edition of the show. Again, really appreciate everybody for being here. Be sure to like, subscribe, video form, audio form. We really appreciate it over here on the show. And we're keeping on going here, right? Preseason. We are more than halfway through. Before we know it, regular season will be directly upon us, and we'll have all your daily Ravens coverage here. So if you're an everyday or you listen every single day, thank you so much for all the support. It really means a lot to me, truly. If you're new to the channel, new to the show, welcome in. Hopefully you'll stay a while. Hit that subscribe button, follow button, video form, audio form, however you're listening along. If you're somewhere in the middle, welcome back in to the show. Be sure to follow me, Twitter, Instagram, ChaosStriker34, trying to build that Instagram up, and obviously Twitter as well, always building that one. So really appreciate all of the support over there too. Really appreciate it. Now, let's get into some trends to look out for. But first, I do want to mention a couple of other guys who I'm a little disappointed that we didn't get to see due to injury or just due to lack of playing time in general. Let's start off with Rasheen Ali. I think Rasheen Ali has a ton of talent, but we can be honest here. If there was the final roster today, I don't think Rasheen Ali makes it. I think Baltimore keeps 3 running backs to start the year. Obviously, Keaton Mitchell not going to be a factor in that right now. If they want to keep 4, they can, but you'd have to sacrifice at, would it be offensive line, defensive back, edge rusher, whatever it would be. You're losing a roster spot there while gaining a running back spot. And is that a decision that they want to make? Ali didn't really show a ton in the first preseason game. He was one of the duds of that game. And while Owen Wright didn't necessarily, do anything crazy yesterday against the Falcons, he did score the touchdown, and he has been continuing to star in training camp. I think there is a battle between those two for one roster spot, and right now it would be malpractice to not give it to Owen Wright. Eric DeCosta has made it clear during his era as Ravens general manager that he's not afraid to move off the draft picks before they play a regular season snap. Right? If it's not working, it's not working. And the 5th round has been Eric DeCosta's trouble. That has been the trouble that he has run into, is that 5th round. Caillou Blue Kelly last season. We got Sean Wade, Ben Mason. I believe his first 5th round pick was Dalen Mack, and we know how that went. It didn't go at all. So the 5th round has been the pet peeve of Eric DeCosta. Just he's not been able to figure it out. Obviously, that does not mean that Rasheen Ali, it's guaranteed it doesn't make the roster. There's still time here, right? We're not at roster cut down day yet. But if I had to make it right now, Rasheen Ali would not be on that roster. And then Tez Walker's another guy, just hasn't had a lot of opportunity. Obviously, he's kind of quieted down since OTAs and minicamp. He was one of the stars of those. He, I think, has flashed at 1 or 2 practices, but really hasn't done a ton after that at training camp. So it's tough. John Harbaugh saying he's working through a little bit of a rib thing, I believe it was. So, he's someone that I thought could have had a bigger role to start the season, but with how it's gone for him, I don't expect that at all. I think they're probably going to favor keeping a veteran and playing him over Tez Walker and kind of having that be the situation. And it is disappointing because I think Tez, again, is a super talented player. I think he has a bright future in the league, but it's been a slow start for him at training camp for sure. Now, a couple of trends to look out for as we move into week 3 of the preseason, because I think, again, that right guard spot is one that I'm going to be watching out a ton for. Backup quarterback, and Josh Johnson continue that trend and continue. Well, if he had another perfect game, that'd be great. But, can he just have a good game, solid game where he's able to command the offense? And then I think as well, on the defensive side of the ball, it's just guys continuing to prove themselves, right? With David Ajabo, hopefully Tavius Robinson, these guys, even Adisa Isaac, right? He had a solid game before having to leave. And that's the other thing about this preseason game, by the way, is the Ravens got out relatively healthy. Adisa Isaac had to leave. I think that was it, if I'm not mistaken. There might have been one other guy, but Adisa Isaac is the one that I know. That's it. That's solid. You never want to see a guy go down preseason. Crazy things can happen. But the Ravens in this game got out pretty healthy. But there were 3 positions I was looking at coming into the game: backup quarterback, offensive line, particularly right guard, and edge. Right? My hand was, not completely over the panic button, but we were getting there a little bit. The backup quarterback spot, feel a lot better about that. I do. Not completely, but I feel a lot better. Edge, I feel a lot better. Like my hand is, we're not over it anymore. Again, Ajabo has to keep stacking. Tavius Robinson has to keep stacking. And Afe Owe will play a factor in that as well once the regular season comes around. Kyle Van Noy. But David Ajabo did a ton on Saturday to at least give me a lot more confidence that he can step in and be a solid number 3 edge rusher. Offensive line, right guard. I don't feel any better. This is kind of, it was the same situation that we were talking about going into this game. It was, they had 4 spots decently locked down. Linderbaum and Stanley are locked in 100%. Voorhees and Rosengarten, pretty locked in. Right guard, I don't know what in the world is happening over there. So right guard, I got my hand over the panic button. That's probably the one. And I don't know what they're going to do, but they have to figure it out. Do they move Ben Cleveland back there? Do they give another guy an opportunity? Is it going to be Daniel Falele? I don't know, but they have to figure it out quickly. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you again for tuning into this bonus episode of the show. Like the video, subscribe to the channel in video form, follow along, subscribe in audio form as well. Coming up tomorrow, we'll be back here, more Ravens content, continuing to break down the Ravens, their preseason, and a lot more. Stay tuned. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.